All right, welcome to the Latest.com show. I'm Igor Deris, joining us from Canada. He's a staff writer at Latest.com and a contributor to Ishihawk. From Toronto, Eric Carrier. And he's a military vet and Latest.com senior political analyst. From Pittsburgh, Josh Patton. And he's a 24-year veteran of the U.S. State Department and the author of We Meant Well from New York, Peter Van Buren. Well, all good things come to an end, and we had a fun primary, but it appears to be the end of the road for Bernie Sanders and Ted Cruz. Cruz is now completely mathematically eliminated from clinching the nomination before the convention, while Hillary has, I think, 90% of the delegates she needs to get it before the convention, which means she could pretty much lose every remaining primary by 50 points and still be the Democratic nominee. Trump still needs to get big wins in Indiana and California to get the nomination, but given what he did last night, winning every state with more than 50 points and two of them with 60 points, that shouldn't be too hard. So here we are. We started with 18 candidates on the Republican side, 5 on the Democratic side, and now we're down to 2 who also happen to be the 2 least popular candidates in the entire race. On the face of it, seemingly Trump's nomination, I guess it's inevitable now, his nomination, it would be good news for Hillary. But it's a little too early to celebrate because Hillary Clinton is the least popular candidate in modern Democratic Party history, while Trump hasn't even reached peak popularity yet, and last night pretty much proved it. Months ago we wrote him off as a guy who couldn't get 40% of the vote in most states, much less 50, and he swept every state without any problems, and the guy's still getting support right now from Republicans just resigning themselves to the idea that Ted Cruz and John Kasich ain't going to save their party. While Hillary's actually falling in the polls, regardless of how these individual primaries have shook out, she's pretty much tied in almost every national poll with Bernie Sanders right now. So you have Trump rising, you have Hillary falling, and now Trump is doing his big pivot, right? Today he gave his foreign policy speech where he read off a teleprompter like a grown-up. Yesterday he gave a press conference where he didn't mention his dick even once. And, he's becoming that boring presidential guy that he said he would all along. And let's face it, Americans have pretty short attention spans, and there's 6 months until November. So we can all pretty much forget about crazy-ass Trump and when we see low-key, tame Trump for the next 6 months leading up to the general.
Medicated.
Medicated. The Democrats had a chance. They had a fresh new face, albeit a 74-year-old one, but still a guy who, despite being a self-proclaimed socialist, did much better against the Republicans than Hillary because he wins over independents, which is, half the country. So instead they picked the one candidate who's vulnerable enough to maybe have a chance to lose to Trump, a woman candidate who's disliked by more than half of the women in the country. We already know this is going to be an ugly race. It's not going to be pretty. There's going to be a lot of voting against rather than voting for. Josh, how ugly do you think this gets, and how close do you think it gets?
I think that the past couple years or couple elections have shown us that we're probably in for razor close presidential elections, regardless of who the candidates are. If you look at how, I think more so than looking at 2008, we should start looking at 2012 because, Obama was not doing great when he started running for re-election. And then, the Republicans, thrift store mannequin, in Mitt Romney. So I think that it's, I'm just going to add to the heaping giant buffet of crow that I've had to eat this entire cycle. But I think it's going to get surprisingly serious given the way that the shit show has played out for the primary. I mean, the only way that Trump even rates against any Democrat, even Hillary with her high unfavorables, I mean, just given the way the electoral map goes, is if he is able to still be a bombastic sort of character, but in such a way that people feel like they can trust him and that he's kind of got a plan. The Trump's whole thing so far has been like, I wasn't supposed to win and here I am winning. I guess that's because I'm so winning. It doesn't make any sense. He doesn't seem to have a strategy. But now that we are, seeing Paul Manafort's Trump as opposed to, say, Lewandowski's Trump, I think that he is really going to try to pivot to being serious. I don't know if you guys saw the morning show appearances this morning, but, the one on Morning Joe, Trump sounded positively catatonic. And I don't think that's because he was tired or drunk or still laying in bed. I think he was trying to sound, that was his try at gravitas. So, it could get ugly. It has potential to be one of them like a 19th century level ugly sort of campaign. But I almost wonder if, because nothing has gone the way we've expected. I feel like that they're going to surprise us both and be serious, or Trump will be serious and Hillary will be funny, just because what the hell do we know?
Well, Peter, Josh mentioned that it's going to be close, but when you look at 2012, you look at 08, well, I guess popular vote-wise, those were close. When you look at the Electoral College totals, it was a complete landslide both times. So how close do you think Trump can come, given that the moderate candidates of the last 8 years have failed miserably to even come close, given the electoral math that Josh mentioned?
Well, the first thing is, if I were advising Trump, it would be let Trump be Trump. We saw this in one of the debates where he tried to, calm himself down, and it didn't work. It's just not him. And his success to date is very difficult to argue with. And so let Trump be Trump, and particularly against Hillary. She is at her worst when she's rattled. And the more Trump can kind of get under her skin a little bit and take her off message, the stronger he looks. As far as a close race, it's a little bit early in the game. I think it's difficult to call just yet. Well, first of all, we have 6 months. But, more importantly, variables like what is Bernie going to do in terms of his support, his delegates. He remains very popular, as you said, among independents in particular. We all know he's going to have to at least mouth some, support for Hillary, but will he really throw his support behind her? Will his young people follow his lead and support her? Those are huge questions. If those in the independent voters as well, if they lean Trump, then this is not going to be as close an election as maybe it might look. We need to fill in a few of those blanks beforehand. There's also, and I'm the one whose job it is apparently to mention this each episode, and that is there's still the FBI's vote that has not been cast. And I know that at this point it's traditional for one of you to poo-poo this, so we'll just kind of assume that's happening and let me keep talking. But there is one candidate, and as far as I know, please somebody correct me, in the entire history of the United States, there's been only one mainstream candidate who's been under active FBI investigation during the primaries. You can't simply just throw that away. You can't magic wand that off the stage. It remains something out there that is visible. That's a game changer, an October surprise, if you will, as opposed to something simply theoretical that could happen. The way people talk about, well, if there was another 9/11, then Trump's a shoo-in or something like that. We have to wait till some of these pieces fall into place, and then I think we're in a much better position to start to predict what might happen. That said, maybe the next thing to keep an eye on is California. Let's see what Hillary can do there. Let's see what Trump can do.
All right. Eric, I completely interrupted you earlier. Did you want to jump in, even though I can't see you right now?
I was going to say about that. We're only 11 minutes in, and I'm getting my first word. Not too bad. This is a good start. But what I was going to say, though, is essentially that I think we're going to see Trump continue to be Trump, because just I believe it was yesterday, he went on to some appearance, the media, and he said something along the lines of, good, Lena Dunham can leave to go to Canada, and hopefully Rosie O'Donnell goes too, because that would be doing the country a great service. I think he said, quote unquote, now I need to get elected because that would be doing the country a great service. So, Trump is still engaging in that kind of high school nonsense. I don't think we're going to see that go away, but he will get more serious when it counts. But as Peter was saying, he really needs to push Clinton into a corner because he's terrible when she's under pressure. And if he can kind of make that robotic laugh come out and put her on the spot on certain issues, and then deflect it in a true Trump way where he just kind of pulls his dick out and slaps it on the podium, he's going to be fine. Like, this is how he's going to win the election. He's just going to, have a dick clinging contest, and, well, Clinton doesn't have a dick, so she's going to have a lot of trouble.
I don't know.
First of all, I got to disagree with that. I got to disagree with that assessment.
Cannot jump to conclusions about Clinton.
Yeah. And her lady balls, I imagine that they're bigger than we give credit for.
Balls than Clinton, possibly. Sorry,
yeah.
Who knows?
Yeah. The good thing, the other thing Eric's talking about there is, all kidding aside, is that unlike Bernie, who, for example, in the last debate, appeared to be deeply surprised that he was going to be asked a question about gun control and his record, and appeared to be kind of, searching for an answer to talk about Hillary's connections to Goldman Sachs. I mean, I think Trump is not that kind of opponent. He's going to be ready to respond. He's not going to be caught off guard by her rhetorical tricks. He's certainly not going to be backed into the nice guy corner the way she was able to do with Bernie. In addition, Bernie, for whatever his reason, wrote off one of the big questions, and that is about this FBI investigation. He wrote that off almost immediately in the first debate by saying how the damn emails don't matter. Yet that's just weird politics to throw something away without getting something in return like that. Donald Trump is certainly not going to do that.
See, here's the thing where I want to kind of disagree a little bit with Peter on that, is just that I don't think that Trump is going to be as effective with his sort of his superpower as it is, which is to get under the skin of the person that he's running against. Of any person in politics, the thickest skinned person could arguably be Hillary Clinton, because she's been under almost constant attack from and had scandals basically since before she left the White House as First Lady. So I also think that part of the reason why Bernie has had so much success, because it's certainly not his strengths as a candidate in and of itself, because, again, he's repetitive, he doesn't think on his feet well, he doesn't engage with voters in like an individual way. He gives this really good uplifting message that speaks to a thing that people are feeling, but he wasn't able to capitalize on it. We can't ignore the fact that Bernie did lose a lot of the states that, he would need to win to effectively make this argument. We say that when Kasich says he's the only candidate who can win in the fall, we rightfully laugh because he's won only one state. So, but even though Bernie's won a few more, won plenty more states than Kasich, of course, he still hasn't effectively made that argument by winning states. Now, I think one of the reasons that he has been able to do so well, especially as an old white guy at a time when people are very hypersensitive to things like male privilege and sexism and things like that, is because he was such a nice guy. He didn't go after the email thing. He went after her political record. He didn't call her Crooked Hillary or imply that she murdered Vince Foster or all the other horseshit that's out there. He just, casually raised questions about her connection to the political establishment, and that kind of stuff works. If Trump is able to, Trump said today that he would look at Bernie Sanders' speeches and pull some of his best stuff from there. If what he pulls from that is politely attacking Hillary's character, the Democrats just might be fucked. Luckily, I feel like there's more of a chance that, Hillary will give birth to the love child of Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders, and then, nominated as her vice president before Trump would be polite and kind in the way that he tears down Hillary Clinton. He's going to call her crooked. He's going to say some women shit, and they're going to galvanize. I think that's what happens.
Yeah, she lays eggs. She doesn't give live births. I think
that's true.
Point of order there. But I think Justice, the difference here though is separating Bernie the nice guy from Bernie the guy who won't press a political point. And I think Bernie is guilty of both of those, if you will. You can be a nice guy, and as he did, for example, with the whole Goldman Sachs issue of the speeches. You can be a nice guy, but you can still press hard on a political point. He didn't do that earlier in the campaign, particularly in the early debates. He didn't seem to know how to do those two things at the same time. So I think Hillary is vulnerable, and I think Trump is going to be studying those speeches. I mean, I can just hear the words coming out of his mouth about, I know Goldman Sachs. I've worked with Goldman Sachs. I know exactly why they gave you that money. And I know how that works because I give people money to do these same kind of things. She's going to have a hell of a time answering those kind of things, wrapping herself in Obama. Trump is just sitting there waiting for that because that's going to open the door to a lot of independents. It may play well with Democrats. It may play well with black voters who aren't going to vote for Trump anyway. But it is not going to speak to Trump's base and hopefully, in his mind, his expanding base.
Well, Trump said that he's going to attack her on things like Goldman, like things like that. And even if she becomes the most liberal politician we've ever seen, there's still an establishment quality to it. And, the Sanders voters are going to be maybe the key voting bloc to decide this election, particularly the independent voters. A lot of the independent voters weren't deciding between Bernie and Hillary. They were deciding between Bernie and Trump. And there's plenty of Democrats, by the way, who also say they will never support Hillary Clinton. And now you have Trump, who's anti-establishment, anti-Iraq war, anti-trade deals, anti-interventionism. There's a lot to like for Bernie supporters who don't care about things like Muslim bans or walls. Eric, how many of these voters do you think Trump can win over?
I think it depends if near the end of the primary cycle, if Sanders does go and endorse Clinton. I don't think he'll ever do it wholeheartedly, but he may say okay, let's vote in this direction. If he does something like that, we may see Clinton do well and attract voters. But I think if he leaves it open-ended, and it seems like that's what he's leaning towards based on what he said earlier today or yesterday. It's tough to say where his supporters are going to go. I could see a lot of them flocking to Trump because of his, anti-establishment kind of credential that he's building up. But there's also the block of sensible minds, you would hope, that are afraid of the Trump because of his more racist wall-building side. It's tough to say where these people are going to end up. I would think that come election time, people are going to kind of side with the party that they're with. I think most of Sanders supporters, in my opinion, will go to Clinton's side. Personally.
But I'm talking specifically independent voters. Sanders has an interesting coalition, but I don't think that the young people that he's turned out would ever turn and vote for Trump. But when you look at white guys particularly, Josh, how attractive are Trump policies to Bernie supporting white dudes?
Well, the one thing that's interesting, I think, is how close they are on the issues that Eric mentioned, especially things like anti-interventionism, trade, stuff like that. So I think that there might be an appeal to, when I was at the Pittsburgh Bernie Sanders rally, I was surprised that for all the college kids in Bernie shirts and wigs and glitter paint T-shirts and there for Rockstar Politics, there were a lot of older white men who were there for the trade message. So Trump might pull those guys because if they believe that Trump is going to bring back the entire industry that the United States has been shedding for, almost actually a genre of jobs, manufacturing in general. We've been just hemorrhaging those type of jobs for decades. If Trump convinces them that he's going to effectively bring those back, he might pull some of those. But for a story I'm writing today for Latest about basically about how the Bernie Sanders supporters are essentially wrenching their garments on social media right now and crying to the sky. What I'm seeing a lot of them saying is not that they will vote for Trump, but rather that they will just stay home, which they are, thinking is sort of like letting Trump win. Again, I think that if they just stay home, I think Hillary might be all right, and the Democrats might be all right because of things like the court and which again is an issue that Republicans are foolish to make an election issue because I really feel like, especially with someone like Merrick Garland up there now, that's going to push people more towards the Democratic side than the the Republican side, especially since it appears like the Republicans are shirking their duty or trying to game the system, which, again, this is an election for people being aware of that. The other thing that I think is notable and kind of a side note is that, the Bernie Sanders message about money in politics and sort of the old trickery stuff, it's not working this time. And I think that as long as Hillary and the Democrats are able with a smart VP pick to capitalize on that, they will pull enough of Sanders supporters, especially if she does something like nominate Warren, which I know Peter doesn't think. Although, here's the thing, that Bernie Sanders statement from last night, it might be just me writing political fan fiction in my head. I admit that. But it seemed to me like he was kind of angling to get enough delegates that he could possibly be on the ticket. I don't know if he wants that. I don't know if Hillary would ever accept that. I doubt she would, because of how, the Clinton camp does seem to hold a grudge in a way, especially when they win. But I think as long as he's able to tap into some populist person that's able to speak to those issues convincingly, enough of the Sanders supporters will go to Clinton. The rest may stay home. Your white working class fellas might go to Trump, but let's be honest, white dudes aren't deciding any elections in this country from now until forever.
Well, okay, but you also have, hold on one second, you also have the woman issue, right? I mean, on the one hand, I mentioned earlier that women don't particularly like Hillary, but they definitely don't like Trump. I mean, one Gallup poll had like 67 or 70% of women have an unfavorable opinion of him. Just in the past 24 hours, Trump said if Hillary was a man, she wouldn't get 5% of the vote. He talked about her shouting and said, ew. In a general election matchup, and he's not going to let this up, and that's half the electorate. Peter, how much is this going to hurt him among these key voting blocks?
Yeah, I think less than we might think. The first point to raise is that when you're counting on people voting defensively to win, that's a pretty weak strategy. Defensive voters are not passionate. They can stay home because it's raining. They can find themselves derailed over some small thing. I mean, that's a very
there are a lot of people that passionately hate both Trump and Hillary.
Oh, yeah. But I mean, right. But to get someone to do something proactively, I think positive passion is a lot stronger than negative. So we'll see about that. I think Trump understands that women are not necessarily a solid block. The women that are passionate for Hillary are probably a group of people that wouldn't vote for Trump under any circumstance imaginable. I mean, he could have a sex change, and it would not be enough to bring that group over. These are the hardcore people that have followed Hillary for decades, that have seen her as a front leader of women, a crusader, a feminist who is sort of the person they've waited their lives to see in the White House. And they're not moving anywhere. Trump is talking to people who are disgruntled, disenfranchised, and angry. Some are men, some are women. I think a group of them actually agree with him, gender independent, agree with him that men are smarter and should play with sharp toys and girls should stay home. And I think that another chunk of them in there are kind of doing the wink wink. Yeah, there's Donald again. But I mean, fundamentally, so what, things aren't going to be that big of a change. It's not like he's going to, get us paid less or whatever it is going to be there. So I think he'll pull his share of women. I think he understands that the people he's pissing off, are not his people anyway. So I'm less concerned. I want to say one thing about the Bernie voters, particularly the younger ones. A lot of them are first-time voters in a presidential election for sure. And they are subject to an extraordinary amount of disillusion. This is probably for many of them the first time they've engaged in a campaign, the first time they felt, really kind of gotten emotionally connected to a candidate. And now that rug's been pulled out from under them. They may be very hard people to motivate to shift their votes to anyone. And so I'm going to nod towards Josh and say a lot of those folks will just stay out of it. They'll sit home. The Democrat Party will need to think about bringing them home in the future, or they're going to end up all splintered off, reading Ron Paul websites and collecting Howard Dean trading cards.
Well, just to switch over for a sec, Josh mentioned Paul Manafort earlier, and Trump hired him a few weeks ago. He's a longtime Republican operative. Actually worked for like a Ukrainian presidential race a few years back. But he goes back.
He called it the torturer's lobby, the firm that he worked for. It was.
And he goes back to Republican campaigns all the way back to the 70s. They also hired Rick Wiley, who had run Scott Walker's campaign and is now the Trump national campaign director. And not only are we seeing a tamer Trump as a result, we're also seeing a much better ground game. I guess Tuesday he cleaned up in the unbound delegates in Pennsylvania. The Never Trump people won like 5 out of 32 seats, which would be unthinkable, a month ago when Ted Cruz was just crushing it everywhere. Eric, how big a deal is it that now all of a sudden Trump has a real campaign, like a pretty good one?
I think it's a big deal because if Trump was managing to dominate when he was acting like an idiot, then the fact that he actually has good leadership in place now to guide him when he needs it is truly a big thing. And I think that he'll be able to challenge Clinton on a professional level now because he's going to have that guidance. He's not going to have Lewandowski like grabbing girls' arms and throwing them to the ground versus, a more professional game, which is. Come on, it's the Latest.com podcast.
Why do you love Trump so much, Igor? Why do you love him?
But my point is, I think Trump is in a good place now because he has the proper leadership. I discussed this before, I think, months ago on our podcast, saying that the moment Trump hired professionals to actually guide him properly, he would be able to take off and lead a serious campaign. So the fact that he was able to do it without that, it can only get better for him.
Josh, we talked about it before, how Trump said all these things, had the support, but when it came to actual ground game and going all the way back to the first contest in Iowa, it was a mess. How big of an impact could this be at plugging up those holes where he would just be leaking delegates to Cruz?
I think really effectively. Oh, go ahead, Peter.
Oh, just real quick. I agree very effectively, and I think we should also not discount the fact that maybe people in the Republican Party had a quiet little sit down with Trump and say, look, if we're going to support you, we need you to stay within certain boundaries and you need to let us help you. So, here's a couple of guys we want you to consider bringing on the team who are going to help you stay within the boundaries that the Republican Party can support you. So these may be ringers, if you will. Sorry, Josh.
Well, here's the way I think about it is I think that, seeing it and how effective the new team has been, specifically the way that delegates were being handled in Pennsylvania. Now, one of the local papers here, the Pittsburgh Tribune-Review, a reporter named Selena Zito, she would call all the delegates that were running every week to say, where do you stand? And for the most part, all of them were uncommitted. But then once campaigning started, these delegates were changing their minds, and they were changing their minds because they said they were getting FaceTime with the candidate, specifically Donald Trump. So I think that sort of attention to those kind of details has improved Trump's chances. And, my political reporter's heart is broken because I don't think that the contested convention, the open convention chaos that we were all hungry for is going to happen. I think that Trump will probably be able to rally and what he needs to, if not get the nomination on the first ballot, be close enough that actually, no, I think he will get it on the first ballot, especially if he continues to win. If he takes Indiana, it's over. He will get the delegates he needs. That said, I don't know if that puts him in any better place nationally, because remember, the RNC had a plan to be competitive in 2016, and part of that plan required at least 40% of the Latino vote. It required engaging women and young people. And while Trump does have some young people there in a way, like more than I actually expected when I went to his events, it's nowhere near the level that Bernie or even Clinton or even Chelsea Clinton drew when she came to Pittsburgh. So I don't think that the RNC is going to be in that good of a position. Now, Trump does put some states on the table that may not have been. There was talk of how Utah might go blue if Trump runs, but there's also some PA absolutely could go red, especially given how overwhelming his support was here. It will be a very different sort of electoral map. I think that's part of the other reason, too, why you're seeing more people coalescing around Trump, is that they're starting to understand that since their original strategy to draw more people into the Republican Party has kind of failed, or at least the kind of people who build a coalition that will help you continue to get elected, that in changing the electoral dynamic of these states with a candidate like Trump is perhaps their moonshot to possibly win the national election. Yet you still have the Ryan campaign so that the senators and congresspeople can campaign with Trump or not if they choose.
Eric, did you want to jump in?
So earlier on, I was going to say, I was going to piggyback on Josh's comment about how the contested convention idea is kind of lost now. I agree. The moment you had Ted Cruz and John Kasich join forces into an unholy alliance, talking about how they were going to try to split states and pull delegates from Trump, how desperate are you? That's not the campaign of a presidential candidate. It's a campaign.
It wouldn't even be so bad if they actually went through with it. Kasich was on NBC talking about how I'm not telling you who to vote.
Not even 24 hours later.
Yeah, it didn't last.
Yeah, for Indiana. Well, he said something like, "I want the Indiana to be my state. Cruz will have to give me that one." It's kind of sad. You can't see people like that and expect. You can't call them presidential. And this is an election where we have Donald Trump, and he's not a guy that you would consider presidential either. But at least he's actually managed to win a couple primaries, unlike Kasich.
Take a look at. Oh, I'm sorry. Another strength Trump has. Bernie Sanders is at the end of his career. He's not really even a Democrat. In terms of being a party guy, he has really nothing to gain other than maybe a little more messaging from supporting Hillary. All the Republican candidates who have their own little, some of them very little pools of support, all have a lot to gain from a Trump presidency, mainly jobs. Ted Cruz has a boner over the idea that he could be attorney general. John Kasich would be happy just to have a job. You could see where all these guys would really dive in and support Trump. We see Chris Christie. Chris looked pathetic on the stage the other night behind Trump. I really thought his tongue was just going to come out. But the idea is that these are strengths for Trump. These are surrogates who can go out there and talk to evangelicals, who can go out there and talk to hyper-conservatives, things like that. Hillary really has got Bill. Maybe Jim Webb will come back in on her side. I don't know.
Well, let's assume that Trump is the nominee, as we have, because, Ted Cruz isn't going to suddenly run the table just because he picked Carly Fiorina as a pseudo-running mate, for the convention. We saw how the Kasich alliance went. So let's assume Trump is the nominee. What does that do to the future of this Republican Party? Josh?
That is an interesting question, especially considering what happens to the Never Trump movement. If the Bernie or bust people, like I said, they're either going to stay home or get in line. The Never Trump people, it feels more like they would get in line just because of, despite what the Bernie folks are saying, Republicans don't consider Hillary a Republican, and they're absolutely going to do everything they can to not see her win the White House. I don't know why she is so viciously hated from the right, just because she's a Peter, I could put you in my pocket. But I do think that the party is going to have to really just look at itself, like, and take into account, like, what some of these people who, like, protested the Muslim ban or, the comments about immigrants, they have to look and see if they recognize that all Trump was doing was giving voice to the subtext they had been saying all along and are okay with it, the party's going to come out of this pretty strong, I think. But if Trump wins, if Trump loses, or if Trump somehow doesn't get the nomination, if something crazy still happens, I do think the party splits and maybe in a way that's fatal. So that's also, I think, why, even though it's been flirted with, a lot of the Republicans will coalesce around what Trump said, partially for the reason that Peter pointed out, is that especially as a businessman, Trump knows you give a guy a job and some money and some influence, and a lot of water can run under the bridge.
All right, so Cruz picked Fiorina as his running mate, which is kind of akin to like inviting someone on board the Titanic while it's already halfway in the water. But I think it's pretty important who Trump picks to be his VP. Eric, Chris Christie seems to be his biggest fan. Is he also the odds-on favorite to be his running mate?
There's just so many choices for it. Didn't Trump suggest that he liked Christie before, though, or something?
You mentioned him. He mentioned Walker. He mentioned Rubio. A lot of those guys laughed.
Mentioned Kasich.
I don't know. Maybe Trump goes off the walls and picks somebody we don't expect. It's hard to predict because all the selection we thought we knew what we were talking about, making predictions, and we looked like assholes every time. So
here's what I would do if I was advising Trump now. I would have Trump come out and say today that, it's premature to announce a VP nomination, but despite what, Senator Cruz says, Carly Fiorina is at the top of my list, too. If he does that, all the air is sucked out of Cruz's shitty fake announcement, and, he's back to trying to prove he's not the Zodiac killer.
He said that this whole Fiorina thing is a waste of time and desperate and the usual Trump thing.
Yeah.
He's actually right this time, though.
Yeah.
The Republican convention, check me, gentlemen, the Republican convention is after the Democrats, correct?
No, it's before.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's
before. Okay, well, that may be part of what Trump's strategy is, but I can't see him going wrong by finding a woman to run with him. I don't know. I can't pin a name on it right now. But the idea would be of balancing the. Pardon?
Which one?
Well, I don't know. Maybe Sarah Palin. I don't know. But I mean, the idea would be. Come on,
that would make me so happy, Peter. Stop it! I would get that. I'm too excited.
I don't know. Heidi Cruz. I don't know. Pick one. I mean, the idea of really shoving it back in people's faces. And especially having a woman to go out there and really take the shots at Hillary Clinton, to pull any air that they can out of the first woman president, thing like that, to reshape Trump's image. I don't know. There'd be value in that. The other thing would be for Trump to just pick somebody very...
Because Trump's going to make tampon comments and period comments, and that woman's just going to have to go
I don't know. Maybe he'll get a supermodel from Croatia to come in and do the job. I don't know.
They can go full house of cards and go like Trump and Melania, although I'm pretty sure Melania is not a registered Republican like no one in the Trump family is.
But, the other thing, though, would be easily to see Trump, as I feel will happen with Clinton, pick a nobody, somebody we don't really know very well. Trump and Clinton are both such huge presences. They really can't exist with someone who has their own sort of, gravity. This is, again, why I don't think Elizabeth Warren will end up as VP for Hillary. Not this time. Next, 4 years from now, Elizabeth Warren is going to be knocking on the door. But Trump has got to be Trump, and there's no vice Trump out there. So I suspect it'll be someone we don't know well, we haven't heard of, who will campaign and then quietly fade away.
Could
be a dead person. Could be a fictional character.
Okay.
Andrew Jackson, since he got taken off the $20 bill.
Okay, you know what? That's
Harriet
a possibility. That's a strong possibility.
Yeah.
But let's say he picks, Andrew Jackson or Nikki Haley or whatever to be his VP, some good choice that the Republicans think is a good choice. Let's say he has a great campaign structure. Let's say he's not this divisive asshole talking about his junk. How do we talk about his policies without laughing out loud? This is still the guy, because when we talk about presidential, we only talk about his tone, right? This is still the guy that still wants to build a wall, deport more than 11 million immigrants, ban Muslims, give nukes to countries, bring back waterboarding, kill families of terrorists, slash taxes on the richest people, overturn Obamacare, and start trade wars. I mean, how do we look at that?
Well, Igor, when you say it that way, it just sounds silly.
Yeah, I mean, really, you're in the tank. I mean, but look, those are all the things he said, and he's the guy who won. I don't think you can just kind of wipe those off the table, because I mean, he's won.
Romney won too before he got lambasted in the general election. I mean, just because you win over some Republicans doesn't really you won over, let's say, half of the 23% that are registered Republicans. That still leaves 77% of the country who think you're a fucking nut job.
Well, possibly. But I mean, if you take a look at the percentage of the country who thinks immigration is fucked up, and they're willing to support Trump because he's sides with them. He believes what they believe. If you take the percentage of the country who believes that these disastrous trade agreements were in fact disastrous, they're probably of the mind that I doubt Trump is going to start with a 200% tariff on all foreign goods on day one. But he's saying what they believe, and I think that's a very powerful message, particularly if you
what they believe is fucking crazy.
Yeah.
But that isn't what people are doing. They're voting for him. I don't hear lots of people.
A small part of the country is voting for him.
Here's what I think he'll have to do. He'll have to either piss off the passionate base that he's built by middling those proposals into at least lies that sound near believable. Or if he's able to, again, do that thing where he's able to flip-flop on an issue on stage, like in front of people's eyes, and then still win. If he's able to still pull that off, that might be problematic, But I do also think that one of the skills that Clinton does seem to be able to have, and she used it to some degree of effectiveness against Sanders in New York, or at least in the debate leading up to New York, was the way that she is able to sort of pick at those policies in such a way that it exposes the nonsense of it. And whether that would end up being effective or not, I honestly couldn't tell you. Because, again, when Trump speaks, that people hear things. The thing that people said to me the most at Trump rallies when I asked them, why are you supporting Trump? They said it's because he's honest. And I would just look at them, just stunned. And I think what it means is that he says racist shit racistly instead of, like, encoded language. But, if people are still able to accept the fact that, he's like, yes, I feel like the federal government should be involved in healthcare and housing. Oh, well, what I mean by that is that they should be involved by not being involved. If he's able to pull that off in the general, yeah, it might be, like I said, blue states might turn red, purple states will go red. It might get tricky.
A lot of people are not voting on policies like this. They're not out there, saying, I wonder exactly how that opinion on Glass-Steagall will actually work. I mean, this is the pundit kind of thing.
No, they're voting on the wall and the Muslims and stuff like that.
A lot of people are voting emotionally.
What passes for policy in a Trump campaign. So they are voting for policy. It's just, as Igor said, an insane policy.
Well, such as it is. But, I mean, it's the classic idea of who would you rather have a beer with kind of question. I mean, those are the emotional things. Well, I hope both of them would go away. I would never want to be drunk around either of those people. Could you imagine sitting at the table with two of them and wondering who the fuck's hand that was on your thigh? But that's not the point. The point is that we're all right. No, the point is that people vote, make choices emotionally. And this idea that everyone's out there, all these voters are out there parsing politics and parsing theories and, reading the 700 pages on Hillary's website about tax reforms or something. I mean, that simply is not true. There's going to be a lot of gut reaction type people, and Trump is good at pulling them in.
Well, Eric, what about the activists, the various special interest groups and identity politics groups that have already, they passionately don't, they look at the policies and they're like, no. In universities, when you put the name Donald Trump 2016 in chalk, they call it hate speech. It's gotten to that level where people are just like, if you say Trump, you're a racist. So how do you overlook that?
Moment, bro.
What?
I was just expressing my pride in America. Sorry.
I'm waiting. If you're trying to say, like, how does Trump overcome that level of sensitivity? I don't think he has to.
Not sensitivity. These are people that look at the policies and say, no, we can't possibly allow this man to have his finger on the button.
Right, but when I look at, like, the whole liberal college student thing, I consider myself to be a liberal as well, but I respect other people's, beliefs and whatever they enjoy as long as it's not harmful to others. But the current crop of liberal college students, they only want it their way, and they never want to be able to even.
That was just an example. I don't want to do like a whole political correctness on campus thing, but just those groups are very passionate about it.
But they're not large enough to even be a threat. The average voting bloc is not going to give a shit about any of that stuff. If Trump offers them tax breaks and something else that's kind of next thing, they're voting for him.
Maybe Black Lives Matter is not representative of all black people, but there's a lot of black people that aren't exactly looking to vote for Trump. And I'm sure the same thing that could be said for Mexican people, for Muslim people.
I think you're right on that. I think you're sort of right on that because, again, the college example was bad. But, not supporting Black Lives Matter is one thing, but actively booing them, I think, sends a way different message. And that is that sort of discussion that the party has to have with itself. How badly do they want to win? What sort of things do they want to be known for? And, if the Never Trump people stick to their guns and they walk away and like half the party just doesn't vote on principle, it may actually bring the Republican Party around to a kind of more rationally moral party platform. Or what'll happen is they'll just go, fuck it, and let's see if we win, and then pick up the pieces when it's done.
So, all right. So it's looking like there's not a great chance that the Cruz-Kasich alliance stops Donald Trump, but the real Never Trump believers, like let's say Bill Kristol, are not giving up. They're talking about this guy, Jim Mattis, General Jim Mattis, as a possible third-party pick. Josh, first of all, who the hell is General Jim Mattis, and how likely is it that these Never Trump people would actually run a third-party conservative ticket?
Well, General Mattis he's a retired Marine general, I believe, and he's literally grabbing. He's the straw that Never Trump people are grabbing at to try and rope into running, and to be honest, he's not expressed any interest in running for president. And in fact, just the other day, he told Newsmax. Which doesn't get more right-wingy than Newsmax. He told him that he has no interest in running for president. And if he did, that would be interesting. If he was able to have some sort of significant money operation behind him. For example, if the Koch brothers were to, say, support a third-party Mattis campaign, oh, shit, we got a rodeo again. But the only real danger in that, I think that would spell a big victory for Democrats, of course. But if for some reason it were to catch on, and people, and somehow, and they were able to keep Hillary Clinton from getting to 270, I think we would have a President Mattis, because I have a feeling that the House of Representatives would pick him as the winner of the election, which is their right. So that could be interesting, but it is, again, it's one of the, it's more desperate than naming Carly Fiorina as your running mate. After you just had the biggest sort of political defeat and got mathematically eliminated from the nomination. So I don't think it's a serious threat, but I do think it's interesting at sort of how desperate they are, the Republicans, to get the kind of candidate that they used to have, like these war vet guys who were serious but were still able to speak with compassion. And what they get now are, pastors in clown shoes.
Well, Mathis is exactly what Josh was saying. I mean, he is the reanimated corpse of Ronald Reagan, without being anywhere near as articulate.
Maybe Ike. I think maybe Ike.
Or maybe Ike. I mean, the thing is that I think Mattis's nickname was Mad Dog. He doesn't have any idea how to publicly speak. He can't go out there and answer a question about economics. I mean, any of those kind of people.
Literally, no one knows who he is.
Yeah, that would be another issue as well. So, no, I mean, this is just the part of the Republican Party expressing its giving upness over what's happened there and not ready to admit.
Of the party. The Bill Kristol.
Well, hell yes, they are. They're worried about losing the election. They're worried about winning the election and losing control of the party. They've got a lot to worry about, and the alternative is going to be 8 years of Clinton, because if she does get elected, she will start running for re-election. Literally, that's on Inauguration Day, and I'm sure she'll do well. I can't see her making mistakes during her first term. So I mean, the Republicans are going to be out for 8 years. If they lose this election. So yeah, they're desperate. Yeah, they're afraid. But the question is, what can they really do about it other than throw these things like Mattis out there just to kind of let everyone know they're pissed?
Well, there are existing third-party options there, and we've seen in poll after poll that something like 15 to 20% of America want nothing to do with this Hillary-Trump matchup. We have the Libertarian guy, former New Mexico Governor Gary Johnson. We have the Green Party lady, Joe Stein, Eric. Is it possible that we maybe have a Ralph Nader situation where they don't get a lot of votes, but they get just enough to fuck someone over?
No, I don't think so. Simply
no, because of Ralph Nader.
No, but there's too much of a spotlight on Clinton and Trump to even try to run a campaign. It would be pointless.
No, there are polls. We have seen polls where Gary Johnson is in actual double digits, which we haven't seen from a third party since Ross Perot. And look, Ross Perot did happen. He did change the face of that election, did cost the Republicans the White House. It's not that out of the question. Josh, do you think that maybe these two combine to really screw over one of these candidates? And which candidate would that be, by the way?
That is the more interesting question. Again, if the level of Never Trump and Bernie or Bust continues unabated through the conventions, which I do think that people will fall in line. I mean, I've already seen people doing the old thing where they go, take the Democrat and put him as a VP for the Republican and boom, we win. So that it's the stages of political grieving, I think. If it does stay though, if it doesn't if not enough people fall in line on either side, it's possible that someone like Johnson might. I don't think Jill Stein would have that great of a run.
Not as much as
again, just because she's less known. The Libertarian Party's actually had a televised debate. I mean, it was on Fox Business, but it was on TV. So I feel like that would happen. What would be interesting, though, is I do think that it would pull it would pull a lot of independent-minded people who like the idea of non-intervention, like the idea, it depends on how Johnson will sell his taxation is theft belief. If he says it like that, it won't really, I think, help anybody. But if he talks about, reducing government and putting people in charge of their money and their future, that might pull some of the Bernie folks in. So I would say that the one who stands to lose most would be Clinton, because if you're drawn to Trump, it's because you're drawn to an authoritarian, and for all his flaws, Johnson is not that.
Peter, how big do you think the third-party candidates will be in this election?
Less than zero. These people, kind of pop up for a while, are entertaining, give everyone something to talk about. They stir up a few people who end up being on the news, giving, or making polls look the other way, and then the election comes, and it tends to be what it tends to be. Ralph Nader is Ralph Nader, Ross Perot is Ross Perot, Ron Paul. I mean, these are people that exist as asterisks in the record books.
But they changed elections.
They altered elections. And that's possible, but I mean,
Bill Clinton won the White House with 42% of the vote.
Understood, but I mean, these folks have no following, and they're not tapping into a trend. I mean, Ross Perot tapped into a feeling in the United States of discontent that was probably somewhat close to. I mean, I'm not going to.
And he got a Trump bump too, because he was entertaining, so people put him on TV all the time.
Yeah,
That's part of the reason why he's one of the most well-known.
And so he was there as an entertainment thing. He tapped into some anger the way Ron Paul did. But again, we're talking about two giant poles of gravity in this election, Trump and Clinton. Clinton has the Democratic machine behind her. I'm absolutely certain Trump will have his party, the Republican machine behind him. You've got the mass media now who has no tolerance for anything other than headlines. I just can't see a third party playing any significant role, certainly not this late in the game.
Guys, wait. Hear me out. Gilmore Chafee 2016, third-party ticket.
Gilmore Mattis.
Thing is the independent candidate will get maybe like 15 votes, and that'll be like his aunts, his uncles, maybe his grandparents if they're still alive, brothers,
you
sisters.
You guys are vastly underrating how many people are not willing to vote for either one of those two candidates. And based on our track record of predictions,
but they won't
based
vote.
on what you guys just said, I think Gary Johnson might be the next fucking president.
Well, hell, we've just doomed it. Yeah, you're absolutely right. We've just coronated Gary Johnson.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's wrap it up for today. We're gonna come back next week after the big Indiana primary that Ted Cruz is gonna magically get back in this. Thanks for checking out the show. Keep reading Latest.com.
Not mathematically.
Not mathematically. Keep reading Latest.com.